Welcome to Z Time. We make apocalypse stories for survivors. Thanks for listening. On with the tale. Mornings came early in the Gallatin Valley, but I usually came earlier. It wasn't discipline. Not anymore. Not like it used to be. It was habit. The kind that sticks long after the reason for it is gone. I was up before the sun most days, standing on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the pasture come into focus one fence post at a time. The land always looked flat at first glance, but it wasn't. It rolled in shallow waves, dry grass and sage stretching out toward distant tree lines and low hills that turned blue in the morning haze. Beyond that was nothing for miles. That was why I stayed. 6 years on the Mercer ranch. Long enough that the place ran in my head, even when I slept. Long enough that I could tell something was wrong, just by the way the cattle stood, or didn't. This morning, they were fine. Clustered near the north fence, slow and dumb and calm. Steam lifting off their backs in the cold. They didn't know anything except grass and thirst and routine. I envied that. I finished the coffee and set the mug down on the railing. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Morning, Ryan. It was Tom Mercer, owner, 62, lean as fence wire and twice as stubborn. Morning, I said. He stepped out beside me, hands in his coat pockets, looking over the land like he was counting it. You heading into Bozeman today? Yeah. He nodded once. That was all the approval he ever gave. We needed mineral blocks, fence staples, diesel additive. Nothing urgent, but ranch work was just a long chain of small things that turned into big problems if you ignored them. I'll be back before dark, I said. Tom nodded again. Radio said something about disturbances down in Denver. Folks getting violent. I shrugged. Cities were always violent. Didn't mean anything out here. He spat into the dirt and went back inside. I stood there a minute longer, listening to the quiet. Wind moving through grass. Cattle shifting weight. Nothing else. That was normal. That was safe. The truck started on the second turn. Old Ford. Older than some of the hands. It rattled when it idled, but it never failed. I let it warm up while I checked the tires, walked the perimeter out of habit more than necessity. Eli and Marcus were already out by the south fence line. Good workers. Young. They waved. I waved back. They trusted me. That wasn't something I ever asked for. It just happened when you stayed somewhere long enough and didn't make mistakes. I got in and drove. The ranch disappeared behind me slow, swallowed by distance and land and sky. Out here, you measure distance in time, not miles. Bozeman was 45 minutes. 45 minutes of empty road and nothing to interrupt your thoughts. I kept the radio off. Didn't need it. Didn't need anything. Bozeman looked the same as always. That was the first thing I noticed. People walking. Cars moving. Nothing urgent. If Tom hadn't mentioned Denver, I wouldn't have thought twice. I parked outside the supply store and went in. The air smelled like rubber and dust and feed grain. Normal. I got what I came for. Mineral blocks. Diesel additive. Staples. The clerk rang it up without saying much. He looked tired. Everyone did these days. On the way out, I noticed a man standing across the street. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing there. Mid-30s maybe. Dirty jacket. Head tilted slightly forward. I watched him for a second, waiting for him to do something. He didn't. Just stood there. I forgot about him. Loaded the truck. Closed the tailgate. That should have been it. It almost was. I was walking back toward the driver's side when something hit me. Not hard. Just sudden. Hands on my shoulders. I turn on instinct. Training doesn't go away. It just sleeps. The man from across the street was there. Closer than he should have been. His eyes didn't focus right. His mouth hung open slightly. He smelled like rot. Not strong. Just enough. What the hell? I said. He didn't answer. His hands tightened. Not grabbing. Just holding. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. I shoved him. Hard. He stumbled backward. And that was when the car hit him. The sound was wet and heavy. His body folded over the hood and disappeared out of sight. The driver slammed the brakes. People shouted. Someone screamed. I stood there, heart beating faster than it should have. The man didn't move. Blood spread under him, dark and quick. I waited for him to react. He didn't. Someone grabbed my arm. You okay? I nodded automatically. Yeah. I was fine. Just shaken. Adrenaline. Normal response. I got in the truck, sat there a minute, breathing, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. They did. Eventually, I drove home, and I didn't think about him again. The ranch was quiet when I got back. Same as always. Same fences, same cattle, same sky. Eli helped unload the supplies. "Everything good in town?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He nodded. That was enough. I finished the evening checks. Water levels, fence lines, diesel tank. Nothing out of place. The sun went down slow and red. Night settled in like it always did. Predictable, reliable, safe. I showered, ate, sat on the edge of the bed for a while without realizing how long. Eventually, I stood up and pulled my shirt off. That was when I saw it. A thin red line on my left forearm. 2 inches long. Shallow. Clean. I stared at it, trying to remember. Fence wire maybe. Staple. Nail. Could have been anything. I ran a finger over it. It stung slightly. Fresh. I didn't remember getting it. That wasn't unusual. You got cut all the time out here. Part of the job. I went to the bathroom. Ran water. Washed it. The skin around it looked normal. No swelling. No redness. Nothing wrong. I stood there a while longer, watching it, waiting for something. Nothing happened. I turned the light off, went to bed, and told myself it didn't matter. I woke before the alarm, the way I always did. For a moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling into morning. The low hum of wind against the siding. The faint tick of cooling pipes. Somewhere outside, one of the cattle let out a long, irritated bawl. It was a sound I'd heard thousands of times, and it carried no urgency. Just hunger, impatience, routine. I sat up slowly, the events from yesterday already flattened into something distant and manageable. The man in the street came back to me, but not in a way that disturbed me. More like recalling a photograph I'd seen once and put away. His eyes unfocused, the way his hands had rested on my shoulders without urgency or purpose. The impact of the car, the suddenness of it. I waited for the emotional response that most people would probably have. Shock, guilt, unease. It never came. That absence didn't surprise me. In Afghanistan, I had learned very quickly that emotion was a liability in moments where action mattered more. You could feel things later when it was safe, when it was over. During, you functioned. You assessed, reacted, and survived. The brain built walls where it needed them. Over time, those walls stopped coming down. I swung my legs off the bed and stood. My body felt normal. No stiffness beyond the usual soreness that came with physical work. I dressed, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to bite, but not yet winter cold. Frost clung to the fence rails and turned the pasture silver in the early light. The mountains to the south were clear and sharp against the sky. It was the kind of morning that made everything feel permanent. I walked to the equipment shed first. Diesel levels were where they should be. No leaks under the tractor. No signs of animals getting where they didn't belong. Every small confirmation reinforced the larger truth that the ranch was intact and functioning. Eli pulled up on the ATV a few minutes later, Marcus behind him on foot. "Morning," Eli said. "Morning." He nodded toward the north pasture. Fence held overnight. "I'll check it anyway," I said. He smiled faintly. "Figured you would." It wasn't distrust. It was responsibility. If something failed, it was on me, whether I had personally checked it or not. I grabbed the wire stretcher and started walking the line. The cattle moved slowly as I approached, their attention shifting briefly before returning to grazing. They trusted the boundaries they understood. Fence meant safety. Fence meant containment. It was a simple system, and it worked because it was maintained. As I walked, my mind drifted back to the man again. Not the moment of impact, but the seconds before it. There had been something wrong in the way he moved. Not aggression, not desperation. He hadn't spoken or shouted. He hadn't even tried to grab me the way someone normally would in a confrontation. His hands had rested on me with an odd neutrality, like he didn't fully understand what he was doing. I stopped and checked a staple along the post, tightening it with a quick strike of the hammer. People did strange things sometimes. Drugs, mental illness, exhaustion. Cities were full of variables that didn't exist out here. I realized I didn't even know if he had died. The impact had been severe, but I hadn't stayed long enough to confirm it. The driver, the bystanders, someone would have handled it. Called an ambulance. Called the police. It was no longer my concern. That was another lesson the military had taught me. You carried what was yours to carry. Nothing more. The sun climbed higher, burning the frost away. By mid-morning, the ranch had fully come alive. Marcus worked the south trough, clearing debris and checking flow. Eli repaired a loose gate hinge near the equipment yard. Tom stood near the barn, watching everything with the quiet vigilance of someone who had spent his entire life in one place. This was what stability looked like. Predictable problems. Manageable solutions. Around noon, I returned to the house and washed my hands in the kitchen sink. As I dried them, I caught sight of my forearm. The scratch was still there. It hadn't changed much. Maybe a little darker around the edges, but that could have been from irritation. I pressed gently around it. The skin was slightly tender, but not abnormally so. I couldn't remember getting it. That detail lingered longer than it should have. Memory gaps happened. You brushed against something sharp, caught yourself on wire, scraped against equipment. It was part of the environment. Still, I stood there longer than necessary, looking at it, trying to place the moment. Nothing came. Eventually, I let my arm fall back to my side and stepped outside. The day continued as expected. Feed schedules, equipment checks, minor repairs. Each task required enough attention to keep my mind occupied, and by late afternoon the man in town had faded again into abstraction. By evening, the cattle had settled near the western fence line. The sky turned orange and gold, stretching shadows across the pasture. I leaned against the fence and watched them for a while. There was comfort in their predictability. Animals responded to immediate needs. Hunger, thirst, shelter. They didn't dwell on the past or worry about the future. I had spent most of my life trying to do the same. As the sun dropped behind the hills, I felt a mild fatigue settle into my body. Nothing unusual, just the accumulation of physical work and long hours. I rolled my shoulders, easing the tension, and headed back toward the house. Behind me, the ranch remained quiet and unchanged. If anything was wrong, it hadn't reached us yet. The next morning didn't feel right, though it took me a while to understand why. Nothing had changed on the surface. The ranch looked the same. The sky was clear, pale blue stretching over the valley. The cattle were already moving toward the Easter trough, following the routines they had followed every day for years. But I stood on the porch longer than usual, holding a cup of coffee I hadn't taken a sip from. I was trying to remember what I had been about to do. The thought had been there a second ago. Clear, defined. Then it had slipped away, leaving behind only the awareness that something was missing. It wasn't a familiar feeling. My memory had always been precise. It was part of what made me effective. In the military, forgetting things got people hurt. After I left, that same attention to detail made me valuable on the ranch. I knew schedules, repair needs, supply levels, cattle counts. Everything had its place. Now I stood there, staring at nothing, waiting for the thought to come back. It didn't. I took a drink of the coffee. It had gone lukewarm. Behind me, the screen door opened. Tom Mercer stepped out, already dressed, already alert. He had a small radio in his hand. "You hear about Bozeman?" he asked. I shook my head. He frowned slightly, like that answer confirmed something he didn't want to believe. 3 people attacked outside the hospital last night. One of them was a nurse. I turned toward him fully. Attack how? He hesitated, searching for the right word. They said biting, clawing, like animals. The word animals lingered between us. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He looked out over the pasture, but I could tell he wasn't seeing it. They had police there within minutes. Folks on the radio, they're saying it might be drugs. Some kind of new one. That explanation sounded thin, even as he said it. People on drugs didn't attack hospitals in coordinated incidents. They didn't bite through clothing or keep going after being restrained. I realized my hand had tightened around the coffee mug. I loosened it deliberately. "We're a long way from Bozeman," I said. Tom nodded, but his expression stayed distant. "Still," he said, "distance doesn't mean what it used to." He went back inside, leaving the radio on the kitchen counter. I stood there another minute, trying to organize the day in my head. Fence inspection, Fuel check. North pasture rotation. Simple things. Manageable things. I set the mug down and started walking toward the equipment shed. Halfway there, I forgot why I was going. I stopped, standing in the dirt between the house and the barn, the morning wind moving around me. The equipment shed sat 20 yards away. I knew there was a reason I was headed there. It just wasn't accessible. The realization irritated me immediately. Not concern, not fear, irritation. I forced myself to keep walking. Inside, the tractor sat exactly where it should be. Fuel canisters lined against the wall. Tools hanging in their designated places. The order of it helped. Reinforced structure where my thoughts had briefly lost it. Marcus walked in a minute later, carrying a length of replacement wire. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He set the wire down and glanced at me. "You want me to finish the north fence, or wait until after we rotate the herd?" The question was straightforward. Normal. For some reason, I felt a spike of anger. It came out of nowhere, sharp and immediate. "I told you yesterday to finish the fence," I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "I was finishing the south line like you asked," he said carefully. "I asked you to prioritize the north fence." His expression shifted, confusion mixing with caution. "That's not what you said." The anger intensified, disproportionate and sudden. "Yes, it is," I snapped. The words hung in the air. Marcus stared at me, clearly trying to understand what was happening. I realized Eli had stopped outside the door listening. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Then clarity returned just as quickly as the anger had come. I replayed the conversation from yesterday in my head. He was right. I hadn't specified priority. The anger vanished, leaving behind only its consequences. I exhaled slowly. "Finish the north fence," I said, my voice level again. Marcus nodded, but he didn't move right away. He was studying me. Not openly, not confrontationally, just trying to reconcile what had happened with the person he thought he knew. I turned away, pretending to check the fuel levels. After a moment, he picked up the wire and left. Eli followed. Neither of them spoke. I stood there alone, staring at the tractor. The reaction hadn't made sense. I wasn't prone to anger, especially not over routine questions. Losing emotional control served no purpose. It degraded judgment and decision-making. I had spent years eliminating it. I told myself it was fatigue, poor sleep, stress, reasonable explanations. Outside, I heard Tom's voice calling for me. I walked back to the house. He stood at the kitchen table, the radio on, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "They're reporting more incidents," he said. "Not just Bozeman. Livingston. Helena." He paused. "They're telling folks to stay home unless necessary." That was new. Official language like that didn't come lightly. Tom looked at me directly. "You think we need to start locking things down?" The question carried weight beyond its words. The ranch had never needed defense. Isolation had always been enough. Distance, terrain, and obscurity formed natural barriers. But isolation could work both ways. It kept threats out. It also meant help was far away. I considered the layout of the property, the long access road, the limited approach points, the equipment we had available. "We should start being more deliberate," I said. Tom nodded once, relieved to have the concern acknowledged. "Gate stays closed," I continued. "Inventory fuel. Make sure all vehicles are operational." Tom listened carefully. "And the hands?" he asked. "They stay here," I said. "No unnecessary trips to town." He nodded again. Outside, the cattle moved slowly across the pasture, unaware of anything beyond their immediate needs. I rested my hand on the edge of the table. For a moment, I couldn't remember what day it was. The thought returned after a few seconds. Thursday. I was certain of it. Still, the delay stayed with me longer than it should have. I woke up shaking. At first I thought it was the cold. The nights had been dropping lower, and sometimes the house held it longer than it should. But the shaking wasn't external. It was inside, a fine tremor under the skin, like my muscles were idling too high. My sheets were damp. I sat up slowly, breath shallow, and pressed my palm to my forehead. Hot. Not burning, not delirious, just wrong. The kind of heat that builds behind the eyes. For a few seconds, I didn't remember why that mattered. Then I looked at my left arm. The scratch had changed. The line itself was darker, the edges no longer clean. But it wasn't the cut that made my stomach tighten. It was the skin around it. Faint lines ran outward beneath the surface, branching like hairline cracks in glass. Purple. Subtle, but there. I swung my legs off the bed and walked to the bathroom, every movement measured, deliberate. I turned on the light and lifted my arm closer. The veins beneath the skin were more pronounced than they should have been, darker than natural. They threaded from the scratch toward my wrist and up toward my elbow in faint, creeping lines. I pressed on one with my thumb. It didn't blanch. My mouth felt dry. This wasn't possible. Scratches didn't do this. Infection from superficial wound didn't travel like that. Not this quickly, not without swelling or pus or heat at the site. This was something else. I told myself it was coincidence, that I was looking for patterns because Tom's radio had planted something in my head. Bites cause infection, I thought. That's what they'd been saying. Bites. I hadn't been bitten. I flexed my fingers. That's when I noticed the nail. On my left hand, the ring fingernail had darkened at the base. Not dirt, not bruising from impact. It was a deep, almost black discoloration spreading beneath the nail bed. I stared at it for a long time. Fungal infection, I told myself. Circulation issue. You're dehydrated. The explanations came easily. They just didn't feel convincing. I leaned closer to the mirror. My right eye looked normal. My left, there was a red bloom spreading from the outer corner across the white. Not like a burst blood vessel. Deeper, thicker. The color wasn't bright. It was dense, like it was saturating the tissue from beneath. I stepped back. For a moment, the room tilted slightly. I steadied myself against the sink. This is fever, I thought. Fever distorts perception, causes inflammation, causes vascular changes. That was rational. That was manageable. I splashed cold water on my face and stood there until my breathing slowed. When I walked into the kitchen, Tom was already at the table, the radio on low. He glanced up. "You look like hell," he said plainly. "Didn't sleep great," I replied. He studied me for a second longer than usual. "You sick? Just run down." He nodded, but I could tell he filed it away. The radio crackled. National Guard mobilized in several counties. Citizens advised to remain indoors. Reports of aggressive behavior escalating. Tom reached over and turned the volume up. Multiple fatalities confirmed in Bozeman overnight. We locked eyes. That was the first time the word fatalities had been used. "How many?" I asked. "They're not saying." The voice on the radio continued, describing road closures, emergency declarations, hospitals overwhelmed. The language was still cautious, still avoiding specifics, but the gaps between words carried more weight than the words themselves. A thud echoed from outside. Both of us turned toward the window. Another thud. Not mechanical, not wind. Impact. Tom stood first. We stepped onto the porch. One of the cattle near the north field had broken formation, backing away from something beyond the fence line. The rest were shifting uneasily, heads raised, ears forward. Near the far fence line, a man was tangled in the wire. His clothes were torn and filthy. One arm had been caught between two strands of barbed wire, the barbs embedded deep enough to hold him in place. Blood had dried along his sleeve and dripped onto the ground below. He wasn't struggling the way someone normally would. He was pulling forward slowly, mindlessly, the barbs tearing deeper into his flesh with each movement. He didn't seem to understand the cause and effect. "Hey," I called out. My voice carried across the pasture. He didn't respond. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. I started walking toward him, keeping my pace steady. Behind me, Tom said, "Ryan." I raised a hand slightly to signal I had it handled. The man's head lifted as I got closer. His eyes locked onto me. That was when I knew something was deeply wrong. There was recognition in his gaze, but no humanity behind it. No confusion. No relief. Just focus. "Stop moving," I said. He didn't stop. He pulled harder against the wire. The barbs tore free from his arm with a wet, tearing sound. He stepped forward. His balance wavered, but he didn't fall. Up close, the smell hit me. Rot. Not fresh death. Not decay from days or weeks. Something in between. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. You need to stop. He didn't slow. He came straight toward me. His mouth hung slightly open. His breathing was shallow and uneven. His hands lifted, not defensively, reaching. I took a step back. Stop. He lunged. The movement was sudden and fast, faster than anything he'd done before. His hands grabbed at my jacket, fingers clawing, pulling. There was strength there, more than there should have been. I shoved him hard, instinct taking over. He stumbled, but didn't fall. He came at me again. No hesitation, no pain response, no awareness beyond closing distance. That was when the decision made itself. I stepped back, brought the rifle up, and fired. The shot hit him in the head. He dropped instantly, one moment upright, the next motionless in the dirt. The silence afterward was immediate and absolute. My ears rang faintly. Tom approached slowly from behind. You tried talking to him, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I kept my eyes on the body. He hadn't reacted like a wounded person. He hadn't reacted like a person at all. I don't think he knew what I was saying, I replied. Tom didn't answer. We stood there for a long moment, the reality of it settling around us. Finally, Tom said, We can't leave him here. I nodded. Predators would come. Disease would spread. And if anyone came looking, questions would follow. We bury him, I said. We chose a spot beyond the tree line, far from the cattle and water sources. The ground was firm, but workable. I drove the shovel into the soil, lifting and throwing each load with mechanical precision. The physical effort made the fever worse. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool air. Tom noticed. You're burning up, he said. I'm fine. He didn't argue, but I could feel his eyes on me. When the hole was deep enough, we lowered the body in. Up close, I could see the same darkening veins beneath the man's skin, the same discoloration. I forced myself not to look at my own arm. We covered him quickly. No marker, no words, just earth. As we walked back toward the house, I became aware of how tired I was. Not normal fatigue, something heavier, deeper. My stomach churned at the thought of food. I realized I hadn't eaten since the day before, and I didn't want to. Behind us, the ranch stretched out in morning light, calm and unchanged. But the illusion was broken. Whatever had taken that man had reached the valley, and it was already inside the fence. We didn't speak much on the walk back from the burial site. Tom walked slightly ahead of me, shoulders tighter than usual. I could see the shift in him already. He'd spent 60 years believing distance was protection. This ranch had survived droughts, harsh winters, market crashes. Problems came and went, but they rarely arrived on foot, bleeding and mindless. At the house, he went straight to the gun cabinet. I don't like it, he said, pulling out a second rifle. Not one bit. We closed the main gate, I said. Chain it. No one comes up that road without us knowing. He nodded. All hands armed, he added. That would change things. Eli and Marcus had grown up around firearms, but we didn't carry them during routine work. A rifle on your shoulder meant a different kind of day. It meant expectation of trouble. Tom stepped onto the porch and called for them. They came quickly, eyes shifting between us, sensing the tension. There was a man at the north fence, Tom said plainly. Ryan handled it. Eli glanced at me. Handled it how? He asked. He wasn't right, I said. Didn't respond. Try to grab me. I put him down. Marcus swallowed. You mean shot? Yes. The word didn't feel heavier in my mouth. It probably should have. Tom handed each of them a rifle. From now on, no one moves alone, he said. You're armed when you're outside the immediate yard gate stays chained. If anyone approaches, you call it in before you act. Eli nodded slowly. Is this because of what's happening in Bozeman? Tom turned the radio up in response. Statewide emergency declaration under review. Reports of violent incidents now confirmed in multiple states. The broadcaster's voice sounded strained, like he was reading from information he didn't fully understand. Federal authorities urging citizens to shelter in place. Shelter in place. That phrase didn't belong in the Gallatin Valley. Marcus looked toward the long dirt road leading to the gate. You think more of them will wander out here? Yes, Tom said. He didn't hesitate. That answer settled over all of us. The day continued, but it didn't feel routine anymore. Every movement was watched. Every sound analyzed. I walked the fence line with Eli mid-morning. He kept glancing at me, subtle but consistent. "You feeling okay?" he asked finally. "Why wouldn't I be?" He hesitated. "You snapped at Marcus yesterday." I didn't remember that clearly. I remembered irritation, heat, but the specifics were blurred. "I was tired," I said. He nodded, but his eyes lingered. As we walked, the ache in my arm intensified. It wasn't surface pain anymore. It felt deeper, like pressure building beneath the skin. I rolled my sleeve up slightly when Eli wasn't looking. The veins were darker, not faint purple now, closer to black. They traced upward toward my bicep in branching patterns that didn't belong there. I pressed along the scratch. Pain flared sharply, radiating outward. I hissed before I could stop myself. "You good?" Eli asked immediately. "Caught it on wire," I replied. That part wasn't entirely a lie. The fever came in waves now. Moments of clarity followed by a dull heaviness that made it hard to focus. Twice I lost track of what I was saying mid-sentence. By early afternoon, my appetite was gone completely. Tom had set out sandwiches in the kitchen. I stared at mine for a long time before pushing it aside. "Not hungry?" he asked. Later. He didn't push, but he was watching more closely now. I went to the bathroom under the excuse of washing up. When I bared my teeth in the mirror, my stomach tightened. Along the gum line, near the back molars, the tissue had darkened. Not bright red, blackened. The discoloration crept along the edges like bruising under thin skin. I pressed a finger against it. No bleeding, no normal tenderness, just a strange numbness. When I met my own eyes again, the red in the left one had spread further. I felt a surge of anger then. Sudden, violent, directionless. I slammed my fist against the sink hard enough to crack the porcelain. The noise echoed in the small bathroom. I stood there breathing heavily, staring at the fracture spreading across the basin. This isn't me. The thought felt distant. Footsteps approached. "Ryan." Tom's voice carried concern. "I'm fine," I called back, forcing steadiness into my tone. When I stepped out, he looked at my hand. "You break something?" "Porcelain's weak," I said. The excuse sounded thin even to me. The radio continued in the background. National Guard units deployed to urban centers. Reports of aggressive individuals overwhelming local law enforcement. Hospitals unable to contain. Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. The names came in a steady stream now. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't drugs. It was spreading. Tom turned the volume down slowly. "If this keeps moving west," he said quietly, "we won't be as isolated as we think." "We have land," I replied. "Distance. Limited access points." Even as I said it, I knew those advantages only mattered if the threat behaved rationally. The man at the fence hadn't been rational. Late afternoon, Marcus reported movement near the gate. We approached together, rifles raised. It was just a stray dog. We both exhaled at the same time. My patience snapped without warning. "You need to identify before you call it in," I barked. Marcus recoiled slightly. "It was moving low," he said. I couldn't tell. "You assume worst case," I snapped. "You don't panic." The silence that followed was heavy. Tom stepped between us gently. "That's enough," he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was steady. I realized my breathing was elevated, pulse hammering in my ears. Marcus wasn't the problem. The problem was inside my skin. By dusk, the fever had intensified. The scratch burned steadily now, and the dark veins were unmistakable. They were spreading. On my arm, toward my chest. I stood alone near the west fence as the sun dropped behind the hills. The cattle moved slowly through the pasture, unaware of the lines being drawn around them. I flexed my fingers. The nail on my ring finger had turned almost entirely black. I tried to remember exactly when the man in town had grabbed me. Tried to remember if his nails had scraped my skin. The memory was there, but distorted. Hand on my shoulders. Close. Too close. I looked down at my arm again. The veins pulsed faintly beneath the surface. For the first time, I allowed the thought to form completely. If this is it, I don't have long. And the worst part wasn't the fear of dying. It was the fear of what I might become before I did. I knew before I opened my eyes that something had gotten worse. My body felt heavier, like gravity had increased overnight. My limbs responded, but slower than they should have. each movement requiring deliberate effort. The fever was stronger now. It wasn't just heat. It was saturation. My skin felt thin, stretched too tight over whatever was happening underneath. I swung my legs off the bed and sat there for a minute, waiting for the dizziness to stabilize. The room tilted slightly, then settled. When I stood, my knees almost buckled. I caught myself on the dresser and stayed there, breathing through it. In the bathroom, the light was harsher than usual. My reflection didn't look sick. It looked wrong. My skin had gone pale. Not the pale of winter or lack of sun. This was different. Bloodless. Flat. The veins in my left arm were no longer subtle. They ran black beneath the surface, thick and branching, spreading toward my shoulder. The scratch itself had turned a deep, deadened color, the skin around it slightly sunken. I flexed my fingers. They responded, but sluggishly. The blackened fingernail had spread to 2 others now, creeping beneath the nail beds like rot moving through wood. I leaned closer to the mirror and opened my mouth. My gums had darkened significantly overnight. The black discoloration had spread across the lower row, turning the flesh dull and necrotic-looking. I pressed against it with my finger. No pain. That frightened me more than pain would have. Pain meant nerves still functioning normally. This felt like absence. I ran my hand through my hair. Several strands came loose between my fingers. I stared at them. Hair didn't just fall out overnight. Not like that. The anger came next. Sudden. Intense. Directionless. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles whitened, forcing it down. Anger without cause was weakness. It clouded judgment, but was getting harder to control. When I stepped into the kitchen, Tom was already watching me. He tried to hide it, but he wasn't subtle enough. "You look worse," he said. I didn't respond immediately. The TV was on, something we rarely used except for weather. Now it showed footage from a city street. Cars abandoned at odd angles. Smoke rising from somewhere out of frame. Federal authorities have confirmed widespread violent outbreaks across multiple states. The anchor's voice trembled slightly despite professional restraint. Citizens urged to avoid contact with infected individuals. Infected. They'd stopped avoiding the word. Tom muted it. "You were in Bozeman," he said carefully. It wasn't an accusation. "Not yet." "Yes." "You were close to people." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You feeling sick?" I met his eyes. This was the moment. I could tell him. Explain everything. The scratch. The veins. The fever. Instead, I said, "Just tired." He didn't believe me. I could see it clearly. But he nodded anyway. Outside, Marcus shouted, "Tom!" Urgency. We both moved immediately. Marcus was backing away from the equipment shed, rifle raised but shaking. Near the corner of the building, a man staggered forward. His clothes were filthy, his face gray and slack. His eyes locked on Marcus with predatory focus. "Stop!" Marcus shouted. The man didn't stop. He accelerated. Marcus fired. The shot missed wide. The man lunged, fingers clawing. I raised my rifle and fired once. The round struck center mass. He staggered but didn't fall. Didn't even slow properly. I adjusted and fired again, this time into the head. He collapsed instantly. Marcus stood frozen, breathing hard. "I told him to stop," he said. His voice shook. "I told him." "You did," I replied. Tom approached slowly, eyes moving between the body and me. He wasn't just looking at the threat anymore. He was looking at me, comparing, measuring. The man on the ground had the same pale skin, the same darkened veins. Tom's gaze lingered on my arm. I lowered it slightly, hiding the worst of it. "We bury him," I said. Tom didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on my face. Finally, he nodded. We buried the second body further out than the first. The work exhausted me faster than it should have. My muscles trembled with effort. My heart pounded unevenly. Tom watched me constantly now. Not openly, but enough. By afternoon, the fever had intensified further. The world felt slightly unreal, like I was seeing it through a thin layer of distortion. The cattle grazed near the south pasture. I stood watching them longer than usual. Their movements were slow, predictable, alive. I noticed the pulse in their necks, the rise and fall of muscle beneath skin. My stomach tightened. Not hunger. Something else. Something deeper. The thought came uninvited. I could take one down. The realization horrified me. Not because of the act itself. I'd slaughtered cattle before. That was part of ranch life. This was different. This wasn't about food. This was about urge. I gripped the fence until the feeling passed. Forced my breathing to slow. This isn't real. This isn't me. Behind me, the radio crackled again. Military units losing control of several urban areas. Containment efforts failing. Citizens advised that infected individuals exhibit extreme aggression. Tom stood in the doorway of the house, watching me, not speaking. I knew what he was thinking. He'd seen the changes. He'd seen the similarities. He was wondering if I'd brought it back with me, if I was already one of them. I straightened and walked back toward the house, forcing normalcy into every movement. But the hunger stayed, quiet, waiting. Mercer's voice is the one that breaks through first. Sit down. It isn't a request. The long pine table in the ranch kitchen separates them. The overhead light hums faintly, casting harsh shadows across the room. The radio murmurs in the background, fragments of voices breaking through static. Words like containment failure, evacuation, civilian casualties. Someone turned the volume down, but not off. No one wants to hear it clearly. No one wants to hear nothing. Mercer sits at the head of the table, broad shoulders squared, hands folded. The ranch owner looks older tonight. Harder. The lines around his eyes have deepened, carved there by too many decisions made too quickly. Eli and Marcus sit on either side of him. Both armed. Not pointed. Not raised. Just there. Ready. Mercer watches me carefully. Not with fear. Not yet. With assessment. You don't look well, Mercer says evenly. My skin feels tight. Too tight for his bones. Fever burns behind my eyes. The veins in my forearm have turned dark, branching beneath the skin like something spreading roots. Gums ache constantly now, throbbing with every heartbeat. I'm fine. Mercer doesn't respond right away. He glances briefly at Eli, then Marcus, then back to me. We need to talk about Bozeman. The word lands heavy in the room. I say nothing. Mercer leans forward slightly. Were you bitten? No. Mercer doesn't blink. Scratched. A pause. Small. Unavoidable. Eli notices it immediately. Marcus shifts in his chair. Mercer's voice stays calm. Were you scratched? It was nothing, I say. Barely broke skin. Marcus exhales slowly, rubbing his jaw. Eli's grip tightens slightly on the rifle resting across his lap. Mercer studies me like he's studying a horse that might bolt. I can feel it. They're saying it doesn't take much, Mercer says. Not anymore. The words press in on me. The room feels smaller. Hotter. I can smell them, sweat, dust, leather, gun oil. I can hear their breathing. Their heartbeats. I can't remember being able to hear heartbeats before. You think I'm infected? No one answers. That silence says everything. Something inside me snaps. My hand slams down on the table, hard enough to rattle the mugs and make Eli flinch. I buried one of those things for you. I snarl. I shot it before it could reach the herd. I've done nothing but protect this ranch. Marcus's eyes widen slightly. Mercer doesn't move, but his gaze sharpens. We know what you've done, Mercer says carefully. Then why are you looking at me like that? I demanded. I see it now. In all of them. The distance. The calculation. The fear. It burns worse than the fever. You're looking at me like I'm already dead. Mercer exhales slowly. We're trying to understand what's happening to you. I'm right here, I say, my voice shaking with rising anger. I'm still me. But even as I say it, the words feel thin. Unconvincing. Mercer doesn't answer. That hurts more than anything. I step back from the table, the chair legs scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not one of them. No one stops me as I turn and walk out. That's what confirms it. They've already decided. I locked himself in the bathroom and gripped the sink, staring into the mirror. The man staring back barely looks familiar. Skin has gone pale, almost gray beneath the light. Hair looks thinner, dull. Fingernails are darkening. One has turned almost completely black at the base. I bare my teeth. Gums are worse. Dark purple-black, swollen, receding slightly. My right eye is bloodshot, the red spreading like spilled ink. Breathing growing heavier. What the hell is happening to me? Whispering. Veins stand out clearly now, black lines tracing beneath the skin of my arm. My arm ached constantly where the scratch healed over. Not healed, changed. Heat pulses through my body. Thoughts feel unstable, slipping between clarity and something darker. Anger comes fast now, faster than I can control. Underneath it, something else is growing. Hunger, but not for food. The thought of eating makes me feel sick. But when he thinks about the cattle outside, warm bodies, slow heartbeats moving beneath thick muscle, my mind lingers on it too long. I step back from the mirror, breathing harder. No, it won't become that. I locked my bedroom door and collapses onto the bed. Fever racked my body. Sweat soaks into the sheets. My thoughts spin and fragment until exhaustion finally dragged me into darkness. I woke suddenly. Something is wrong. It took me a moment to understand what it is. I stumbled to the door and turned the handle. It doesn't move. I rattled it harder. Still nothing. I stepped back and slammed my shoulder into it. The door shuddered, but didn't open. Something heavy blocks it from the outside. Furniture. They barricaded me in. The realization exploded. Mercer. I roared no answer. I slammed Ned into the door again, harder. Pain shoots through near shoulder, but it barely registers. You don't get to lock me up. My voice sounded wrong. Raw. Animal. I clawed at the door, splinters biting into my fingers, pounding until the wood cracks faintly under the strain. Fingernails scrape and tear. Blood streaks across the surface. Outside, the radio murmurs faintly. Bozeman fully lost. State authorities overwhelmed. Reports confirm infection spreading nationwide. Static swallows the rest. The world is collapsing, and they locked me in here like an animal. Rage consumes me completely now. Blinding. Pure. Fingers bleed freely as I scratched and pound at the barrier. Breath comes in ragged snarls. Every instinct screams at me to break through, to confront them, to make them answer, to make them regret it. Somewhere, deep beneath the fury, fear still exists. But it's fading, drowning beneath something much stronger, something hungry. And as I stood there in the darkness, clawing at the door with bloodied hands, I realized with growing horror, I don't know if I want out to prove I'm still human, or to prove that I'm not. The window breaks easier than I expect. Glass gives with a sharp crack under my elbow, splintering outward into the pale blue of early morning. For a moment, I just stare at it, at the jagged hole I've made, the frost clinging to the edges like sugar. My reflection stares back in pieces. Then I push through. Shards tear into my arm and shoulder. I feel them enter. Feel the resistance of skin giving way. Fabric catching. More glass breaking as my weight forces through the frame. But there is no pain. Not the way there should be. There's only pressure. Awareness. Information without consequence. I fall hard into the dirt outside, landing on my side. The impact jars my bones but feels distant, like it's happening to someone else. I lie there for a moment, staring at the sky. Dawn is coming. The mountains in the distance are black silhouettes against a fading night. The valley is quiet, cold, peaceful. It shouldn't be peaceful. Something is wrong with me. I try to stand. My arm doesn't respond correctly at first. It moves too slow, too wide. My hand misses the ground when I try to brace against it. My shoulder lags behind the motion I intend. My body feels disconnected, like the signals from my brain are arriving late, or distorted. I push again. This time I rise, but it isn't right. My balance shifts unpredictably. My muscles don't coordinate the way they always have. 6 years of ranch work, 4 years of military discipline, thousands of precise movements burned into memory, and now they feel corrupted. I stumble forward. My foot drags slightly behind the other. I correct it. Too much. Overcorrect. Everything feels imprecise. Broken. But the rage is still there. The hunger is stronger now. So strong it fills every empty space inside me. It has weight, direction, purpose. I smell the cattle. Warm, alive, moving slowly beyond the fence line. My head turns toward them without conscious thought. They're close. I can see their shapes in the morning haze. Their sides rise and fall with steady breath. Their hearts beat inside them. I can almost hear it. My body leans toward them. My feet begin to move. One step, then another. Slow, unsteady, drawn toward them. Then a sound. Behind me. Inside the house. Movement. And something else. A smell. Stronger than the cattle. Closer. Familiar. Alive. My head turns sharply toward the house. The hunger spikes. Sudden. Violent. Absolute. I move toward it. Faster now. Still clumsy. Still wrong. But driven. The front door is closed. I don't reach for the handle. I hit it. The wood splinters inward under the impact. Hinges tear loose. The door collapses into the entryway with a crash that echoes through the house. I stumble over it, catching myself on the wall. Inside, the smell is overwhelming now. My head turns. Down the hall. Caleb's room. I know it without thinking. I move toward it. My shoulder clips the wall. My arm drags against the doorway. My body doesn't cooperate the way it should. But it doesn't matter. The hunger is guiding me now. I reach his door. Push it open. Caleb is asleep in his bed. For half a second, I just stare at him. His chest rises and falls slowly. Warm. Alive. He opens his eyes. Sees me. Confusion crosses his face first. Then recognition. Then fear. Ryan? His voice shakes. The sound triggers something violent inside me. I lunge. My hands grab him before he can move. My fingers dig into his shoulders. He struggles, shouting, but he's too slow, too weak. My teeth sink into his neck. Skin tears. Hot blood fills my mouth. It's warm. It's everything. Caleb screams. A raw, human sound filled with terror and pain. It feeds the hunger. I tear at him. Bite again. Flesh gives way beneath my teeth. He fights, hitting me, pushing, but it doesn't matter. His strength means nothing now. The hunger consumes everything else. Footsteps thunder down the hall. Ryan. Eli. He bursts into the doorway and freezes. I see his face. Shock. Horror. Jesus Christ. His hand moves fast, drawing the revolver from his belt. He fires. The first shot hits my back. My body jerks with the impact. The force drives through muscle and bone. But there is no pain. Only pressure. He fires again. The second round hits my shoulder. My arm stutters slightly. But the hunger doesn't stop. I turn toward him. He stares at me, disbelief written across his face. That should have. I move toward him. He fires again. The third shot hits my chest. My body absorbs it. Keeps moving. His fear deepens. He backs away. I reach him. My hands close around his arm. He screams. I pull him closer. Mercer appears behind him. He sees everything. Caleb's body on the bed. Eli in my grip. Me. Mercer's face goes pale. Run. Eli screams. Mercer doesn't hesitate. He turns and runs. Out the front door. Away. Alive. Eli struggles beneath me. But it doesn't matter. Nothing matters except the hunger. I don't know how much time passes. Time doesn't feel the same anymore. The hunger never leaves. It only waits. I move outside. The sun has risen now. Light washes across the valley. Beautiful. Empty. I see Mercer in the distance, running toward the barn. His movements are fast, controlled, human. Mine are not. I follow him. Slowly. My body drags slightly with each step. My coordination is gone. Precision replaced by momentum. I'm not what I was. I feel no pain. Not from the glass in my arm. Not from the bullets in my body. Not from the damage I know exists. There is only hunger. It fills every thought, every movement, every moment. Mercer reaches the barn and disappears inside. I continue toward it. Slow, steady, unstoppable. This is my life now. No pain, no fear, no hesitation, only hunger. That's it for today's story. We would love to see you again soon. But most importantly, stay safe out there.